So when you look at all the Sonic games on the Genesis, they all play very similarly. Sure, they have brand new levels and more features, but same core gameplay. But there's one game that always stood out to me, Sonic Spinball. This game was always kinda strange. Sonic himself looks weird, the music is mediocre, and it plays much differently from the others, as if it were programmed by someone else. Why is this game so weird? Well, I have the answer. Let's take a look. So I finally got braces on my bottom teeth. Hope I don't sound really weird when I do this. What's going on, guys? It's Poger, coming at you with another video. I said it this time, Code Machine. Alright, Sonic Spinball. It's a little weird compared to the others, but we're going to talk about why this game is weird and the deadlines that the company had when they were making this. With that said, if you enjoyed this video, share the love, drop a like. It really does help out the YouTube algorithm. Also, if you enjoy retro content and obscure gaming stories, feel free to drop a subscription. It's only a small thing on your part, but it helps me out greatly. I did notice some new viewers commenting, which is awesome. And of course, we have our veteran members, David Holcomb, Feral Inferno, Lost Forest, FKB, Delta Rise. Always appreciate you guys being here. Anyway, let's talk about Sonic Spinball, shall we? So in the early 90s, Sega Technical Institute, or STI, began development on Sonic 2. STI was a company that was owned by Sega, and it contained both American and Japanese developers. The team wanted Sonic 2 to go all out so that it would do just as well as the first game, but the American and Japanese developers often clashed with each other for several reasons. For one, there was a language barrier because the American developers couldn't speak Japanese. Secondly, there were cultural differences in the workplace. For example, the Japanese developers would often work through the night, sometimes even sleeping in their cubicles, while the American developers would just go home after normal business hours. Some of the members of STI didn't get along with each other. One of the artists on the American side, Greg Stitt, called Yuji Naka, quote, an arrogant pain in the ass, unquote. A few of the American developers had a feeling that the Japanese developers were not happy and figured they would have preferred an all-Japanese team. But despite their differences, Sonic 2 was completed and it was released on November 21st, 1992. This date is important because it came out just in time for the holiday season. It did extremely well and it greatly boosted sales of the Sega Genesis. Despite Sonic 2 working out, the Japanese and American developers did not want to continue working together anymore, so they split into two separate teams. Now that the Japanese team was on their own, they would begin working on the next Sonic game without the American side's involvement. So with a new Sonic game on the horizon, Sega of America wanted it to be released by the 1993 holiday season, since Sonic 2 did so well the year before. But when they found out that the sequel, Sonic 3, wouldn't be ready by then, they commissioned the American team to work on another game. So another thing to consider, Sonic 1 was released in 1991. Sonic 2 was released in 1992. So far, there's been one Sonic game every year. Without Sega of America getting involved, the Japanese team would not have been able to finish the game by 1993. Imagine if there was no Sonic game for 1993, after the last 2 years did have one. Sega didn't want to inconvenience fans, so that's why they asked the American team to make a whole new Sonic game. But there was one problem. They only had 9 months to make a game from the ground up. So because Sonic 3 was not going to be released in time, the American side of STI needed to make a spin-off game to fill the gap. This was going to be difficult, however, because not only did they have a severe time crunch, they were missing the Japanese developers, but regardless, they went right to work. They looked at Sonic 2 and realized that Casino Night Zone was everyone's favorite stage. Here, you have all kinds of objects that you find in a pinball machine. Flippers, bumpers, ramps, and plungers. Taking these elements and making it into a pinball-themed game would be a great fit for Sonic. If consumers liked Casino Night Zone, they would certainly enjoy an entire game that was like it. Because the game had to be completed in 9 months, they had to program the game in a completely different way. Normally, Genesis games were coded in assembly because it's a low-level language. Low-level languages can talk to your computer much easier, but are hard to learn and more time-consuming. If you code in assembly, the program is more likely to execute the way you want it to, but the developers needed a faster solution. In order to save time, the developers opted to code in C, which is a high-level language. C is much easier and more user-friendly to code in, but you're more likely to run into issues with the program talking to your computer. However, it was a price that the American developers were willing to pay in order to get the game released in time. Sure enough, the game was finished by the deadline. Let's take a look. So the first thing I noticed right away, Sonic looks really weird in this game. I don't know if it's his hairdo, but he looks very different from the other Sonic games. His sprite looks really bad, especially when you compare it to the other Sonic games. The reason Sonic looks like this could be because the game is actually a tie-in with the TV show, and perhaps they were modeling Sonic's appearance from that. So your objective is to fight Robotnik, but you have to collect all the Chaos Emeralds first. Most of the game you're just playing pinball with Sonic, but there are a few places where you're platforming. This brings me to my next point. The physics are much different from the other Sonic games. When you're in pinball mode, it's fine, but when you're actually on stage trying to platform with Sonic, it's horrible. He's really slow, and he's really stiff in this game, not fluent like the other Sonic titles. It's clear that the developers didn't reuse any code from the main Sonic games, but why not? Well, according to programmer Peter Morawiec, the game was made completely from scratch without any help from Sonic Team, so everything that was already in the previous games had to be recreated. Unfortunately, the game suffered greatly in the music department. In the first 2 Sonic games, the music was composed by Masato Nakamura, who was a songwriter for the band Dreams Come True. Under his supervision, we received some excellent music in Sonic 1 and 2. Unfortunately though, they were not able to get him for Sonic Spinball. Instead, they opted to use Gems, which was a program that produced sound and music for Genesis games. Lots of Western game programmers used Gems because they were having issues creating their own music for the Genesis. While it was great for developers, lots of the audio that was created using Gems all sounded really weird, like fart noises. You didn't get the same level of quality that you would get if you made your own sound driver. Some of the music in Sonic Spinball is okay, but we don't get near as good quality as we did in the first 2 Sonic games. So yeah, the physics are bad, Sonic looks weird, and the music is mediocre, but the game is still playable and actually kind of fun. There's only 4 stages, but they all have a lot of variety, just like a real pinball machine. And during the pinball sections of the game, it plays perfectly fine. When you defeat Robotnik's machine, it's so satisfying seeing it explode into a million pieces. So the game has some issues, but it's playable and definitely ready for release. But there is one major problem. So major that it caused Sega to scramble at the last minute. So the game was finished and copies were ready to be shipped, but they encountered a major problem. So on the title screen, they used a rendition of the theme song from Sonic 1 and 2. Makes sense that they would do this, but the theme song was made by Masato Nakamura from Dreams Come True, who was not involved with Sonic Spinball. Sega doesn't have the rights to use this song, so they weren't able to use it in Sonic Spinball. They had to come up with another one before the copy shipped. Because the game was due to ship, the lead composer, Howard Drossen, only had 2 hours to come up with a new theme song. Can you imagine only having 2 hours to make a theme song? Despite the unrealistic amount of time, Drossen was able to pull it off just in time for the game's shipment. It actually sounds pretty good. Even though the American developers of STI had massive time constraints, they were able to get Sonic Spinball released by November 23, 1993, which is exactly what Sega of America wanted. The game received mostly positive reviews and sold over 1 million copies. I think Sega accomplished what they were going for here. They knew this game was not going to be as good as the main Sonic titles, but it successfully bought Sega time to work on Sonic 3. So, the development of this game does bring up some interesting points. Going back to the copyright issues with the music, does this mean Sega doesn't have the rights to any of the music from Sonic 1 and 2? Well, that would be correct. This is why you don't usually see many tracks from Sonic 2 get released. If you look at the game's Sonic Pocket Adventure, it's a remake of Sonic 2, but it uses tracks from Sonic 3 in order to get around the copyright issues. So remember when I said the theme song had to be redone before the game was shipped? Well, supposedly some copies of the original version of Sonic Spinball were released by mistake. There's conflicting information on this. Some people even claim they had the original version. Was it actually released, or was the music changed before any of them made it through? Let me know in the comments, which version of Sonic Spinball did you have, and how do you feel about Sonic Spinball? Is there anything I missed about this game, or anything you agree or disagree with? I'd like to hear what my viewers think. So when Sega of America realized that the next Sonic game wouldn't come out in time for the holidays, they commissioned the American team to work on one to hold over consumers. Because they only had 9 months to complete this game, they had to make many changes and sacrifices during the development process. Despite such a tight window, we got a game that, while kinda weird and definitely not as good as the others, is decent and often overlooked. Hey, thanks so much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like rating. It only takes a second and it gets my video noticed by more people. Also, if you enjoy my content, drop a subscription. That way you'll be notified when my next video comes out. Plus, it's completely free. Finally, drop a comment if you have any questions, suggestions, or just want to share your gaming experiences. This greatly helps the YouTube algorithm, and I'm usually pretty good at replying back. Anyway, have a good one, guys.